Welcome to Startup Hacks, a We Global podcast. We explore the stories and secret strategies that women entrepreneurs use to save time and money when bootstrapping and building their businesses. I'm your host, Fernanda Carapina. Welcome back. I'm your host, Fernanda Carapina, and today I'm excited to welcome our next guest, Alexia Hefti. Alexia is a Swiss-Canadian, New York qualified lawyer and is based out of Dubai. Alexia is the founder and CEO of eGovern, which advises governments globally on transitioning to e-government delivery models and companies seeking to explore blockchain uses within their industries. Alexia is also an advisor on the FinTech Advisory Board of the Government of Bermuda. Welcome, Alexia.
Thank you so much, Fernanda. How are you?
I'm doing great, and I'm so thrilled to have you on the show and to have our listeners get the benefit of hearing your story. So I wanted to start today by asking you if you could please share a little bit about your upbringing and your background and how you launched your career.
Absolutely. So I was born in Switzerland, as you mentioned, and I grew up in Hong Kong and actually grew up on a boat. Funnily enough. So
Really?
Spent most of my time in Hong Kong and Taiwan. Since I was a little girl, my dream was to work in international human rights. I aspired since I was about 11 years old or so to work at the United Nations. And so that's really where I kind of targeted my efforts since at a very young age. And I chose to study political science and history as my undergraduate. Because I thought that was the best way to get into essentially politics if I were to work at the United Nations, and then started my career in all kinds of different internships and roles that I could pick up, learning from different people that I thought that could teach me the skills to get where I wanted to be. So I had amazing opportunities to intern at CNN, at HSBC, essentially finding my way to where I wanted to go, but knew I couldn't because I was too young. So, CNN in New York was really fun because you got to be, in the midst of everything that was happening globally. So that was a, really great experience. And then essentially I ended up in New York because I was supposed to actually work full time at CNN. So CNN had told me during my internship that they would give me a full-time position. And so I ended up in New York, and at the time, unfortunately, because of the financial crisis in 2008, I had graduated just thereafter. And so I moved to New York, and they said that they wouldn't be able to give me this position because they were not allowed to hire non-Americans in kind of level entry roles. Because of the recession and what was occurring in the United States at the time. So that was actually an excellent opportunity for me to jump into a bunch of things. I started working at an NGO based out of the UN in New York, and that propelled me to Uganda, where I ended up working with the United Nations very randomly, actually, and had an opportunity to really see a little bit what the organization was about. And realized that it wasn't where I wanted to be. So I was very lucky, actually, Fernanda, to get that exposure at 23 years old, so that I was able to recenter my efforts. But the experience was really fantastic, and that led me essentially my exit from human rights happened in law school, which I realized basically while I was in Uganda, realized that I needed to study law to really understand how international criminal law worked, which was my kind of passion at the time. And went to law school, and in my second year was deployed to Syria, or on the border of Syria, and realized then that what was happening in the field of international human rights law wasn't for me. And so it flipped. And then to kind of summarize very quickly, I ended up falling in love with tax, which was very odd. Because it's super boring. But what made me really fall in love with tax wasn't tax. It was the professor that taught tax. She was absolutely amazing in every possible way. And she just inspired me to work in international tax law, to explore, what that could mean internationally. So that's where I ended up at Deloitte. And, soon in at Deloitte, I realized that international tax was very boring, as I should have known. And so I had like fallen into something very randomly, which was blockchain. And I fell into it again very randomly because a consulting, basically the consulting practice needed a lawyer to review something on the subject matter that was blockchain. And the topic was so fascinating. The actual case study was so incredible that I realized, what is this? And that's where essentially I got to Bitcoin. And once you start learning about Bitcoin and how it's revolutionary and start exploring blockchain more, I built a practice at Deloitte, which was a practice focused on crypto tax. And that led me to, I built a very successful practice, and they asked me to go to Dubai to do the same thing. And it was there in Dubai that I realized tax is too narrow for me. What fascinated me with my experiences at the United Nations, in tons of NGOs and working in international media outlets like CNN, was working with governments and how we can transform the way governments or interact with their citizens, and how we as citizens are able to access services, which quite frankly in most countries is awful. And transforming that relationship using technology, primarily this technology, which I had become fascinated by, which is blockchain, and taking that to really tackle some of the issues that they have. So that's a little bit of the backstory of how I got to doing what I wanted to do. What I'm doing now at eGovern.
Well, that's a great story. And before we jump off, because I want to kind of drill down on blockchain and cryptocurrency, because I think that's so interesting, is I wanted to just point out that I believe, and it seems like your life certainly bears it out, that, your career journey is really a journey of exploring different options. And I always, tell young professional women that it's really about ruling out options as opposed to kind of honing in on this is necessarily what I want.
Absolutely.
Because you kind of know what you want, but then I always advocate going to big companies where you can get a lot of experience into a lot of different areas. So you can say, okay, I like this, but I definitely don't want that. So you can keep narrowing your focus on your journey until you land on something that really excites you in the morning to get out of bed and dedicate your life to.
Absolutely. And Fernanda, I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for the 30 or 40 positions I've had, because I just name dropped big ones that you would know. But quite frankly, I've worked for absolutely, tons of different people, individuals, authors, helped an author write a book too, actually, worked in a cafeteria, worked in a bakery. For me, it was, again, learning about these experiences. What are these positions? And realizing finally that in actual fact, there is no position that is pre-written for me. Only I can write that position. Because truthfully, every morning I wake up, Fernanda, and what I thought I was going to do the day before doesn't happen. It's a completely new and exciting, plane. And that's actually what I love, I realized. Doing all of these jobs made me realize, oh, they're all great, but how can I put them all, package them all up to do my very own? And that's essentially what eGovern is.
So let's talk about eGovern. So I just wanted to take a few steps back, and if you could share with the audience, what was going on in your head at the time when you decided, okay, I'm going to leave this really nice, fabulous job with benefits at Deloitte, making probably a decent salary, and go out on my own? Was it kind of disappointment or frustration with the workspace, or just a real desire to craft your own path and spread your wings into different types of work? And was it scary?
Yeah, Fernanda, great questions. I think it was a little bit of a couple of different things. For sure, frustration for anyone who's worked in a very large corporation, and that includes the United Nations, by the way, for any listeners whose dream it is to work there. Big corporations have so much bureaucracy, and it is very tiring. In addition to that, for me, I was very adamant about focusing on governments and blockchain. Part of the reason I had moved to Dubai was because Dubai, the government in the UAE, has really focused on blockchain as integral to the future of their government. 50% of government transactions must be on the blockchain by next year. Wow. That's mind-boggling, right? No other government's saying that. And they're not just saying that, they're putting the money behind it. So when I went to Dubai, my dream was to say, let's work on these government projects. Let's, apply for them, because we have people who can do that. We can deliver on those projects. But then what I realized was, the backing of the local firm wasn't necessarily there to actually build what I'd envisioned or I thought I was going over to build. In addition, lots of different things happened in my life. I happened to have some partners that had come to me at the right time and said, look, let's, focus on this opportunity. There were actual opportunities that were live at the time. Those actually fell through right after I took on eGovern. I started eGovern, and in that, at that time, it was very scary. And it was very scary for a number of reasons. It's scary because I was, a newfound entrepreneur. And it's one thing being trained in large international organizations. It's another thing having to, jump around in the landscape that is, the startup world. Mm-hmm. But in addition to that, I was recently pregnant at the time. And so I had left a very well-paying job with all kinds of benefits. And now I was, starting my own journey and recently pregnant. So that was something that, was very scary at the time. But I think what definitely what helped a lot was I have, a very supportive network that is, from the home to the work. So my partner is very supportive. And then at the network level, women who, and I would say, both women and men, but I would say stronger push from the women around me who are their own bosses, who are entrepreneurs, some of which are part of the organization, We Global that you run, and women that really help, push you up. So pull you back up when you're feeling like, was this the right decision? Because I could go back anytime to the big firms. And so I was, questioning, should I go back? Because this is really scary. But in actual fact, this is so exciting. And like I said, having the amazing people pushing me, bringing me up, helped along the way. Especially as Fernanda, being pregnant makes you a little emotional. So it especially helped.
It's always good. I'd like to add that it's always helpful to have a strong network around you when you're having a morning in the fetal position, right? I think that every founder, every once in a while, is just like, oh my God, what have I done?
Absolutely.
So I'm absolutely nuts about blockchain and cryptocurrency, and my education in this area is pretty small. So I would love it if you would explain to the listeners kind of blockchain 101 and cryptocurrency 101.
Oh my gosh, that's a tough one. What is, so we can start with blockchain. I guess I'll start with where I started with blockchain because it really blew my mind. I had a project come up at Deloitte, and this was, again, the consulting practice that had come, said they needed a lawyer because there was this project that had come up that with a large gold company that wanted to tokenize unmined gold. And so I had no idea what tokenization meant. And I thought, I started doing research in the field, and it really came down to this technology called blockchain. And what they were trying to do was say, look, if we could tokenize gold, unmined gold, we don't have to take it out of the ground. We will just sell it via a token. And that token ties your right to that gold sitting in the ground. And so I'm in law. I have no idea how that occurs because I didn't learn this in law school. So, I went down the journey of understanding what tokenization was. And that brings you essentially to Bitcoin. And before I go into Bitcoin, I'll say the reason why I even journeyed through this, because usually you can just do the research, pump out the project, and that's it. I ventured through this because I realized, I'm a human rights. I was very much still focused on human rights. I'm also an environmentalist. I thought to myself, wait, if you have an industry saying that they are going to not mine gold, thereby not infringing, not destroying indigenous land, because that's usually the case. It often happens in places. Plus, you're not going to harm or you're again not going to create any type of harm to the environment or to public health, which are often the cases related with mining. But, and the industry still gets to benefit. What is all of this? So you have to go back to Bitcoin because Bitcoin starts it all. And Bitcoin creates this cryptocurrency, which today everybody knows about because of the price, I assume. Fernanda, do you hold any Bitcoin?
I don't. I have to call you after this.
So yeah, it all starts with Bitcoin, and it comes down to